My name is Erica Lawson. I'm 32, I live in Seattle, and this is the story of how my parents used my savings to pay off my brother's credit card debt, then pretended nothing had happened. If you like hearing real stories like mine, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what comes after this, because for a long time I didn't know how it would end. On the mornings when the clouds sit low over the Cascades and the air smells like wet cedar, I tell myself that I chose this city because it taught me how to stand on my own. I rent a one-bedroom in Capitol Hill, a third-floor walk-up with creaky stairs and windows that rattle when the buses grind past on Broadway. I like the noise. It reminds me that I am one person in a city that doesn't know my name, that the only person who can balance my books, money, time, self-respect, is me. I grew up across town in Ballard, in a narrow house with peeling blue paint and a pear tree that dropped fruit on the fence every August. My mom, Janet, worked the front desk at a dental clinic for 20 years. She's the kind of person who folds fitted sheets perfectly and keeps the printed instructions for every appliance in a binder. My dad, Paul, is steadier than most men I know, a maintenance tech at an office park down in South Lake Union, always smelling faintly of WD-40 and laundry detergent. If you asked anyone who knew us, they would have said we were a normal family. We ate spaghetti on Wednesdays. We drove to Golden Gardens in the summer. We argued about chores and grades and bedtime. Normal. My younger brother, Ryan, arrived like late sunshine, 2 years after me, softer around the edges, a kid who could talk his way to a second cookie in the front seat. He was good at being liked. Teachers liked him. Neighbors liked him. He made everything feel like a story, and when you listened to him, you wanted to believe it would all work out. In our house, the roles were passed out early, and no one ever said the words out loud. I was responsible. He was promising. I mowed lawns for extra cash and kept a ledger of what I earned in a marble notebook. He started a YouTube channel reviewing sneakers and convinced a store clerk to hold limited drops because my followers will come. When I announced, at 16, that I was applying for an after-school job scanning barcodes in the stockroom at a bookstore, Mom squeezed my shoulder and said, "I love that about you." When Ryan asked for an advance on his allowance to buy a drone for content, Dad sighed, told him to be careful, and handed him the money. I didn't resent him then. Not really. I just adjusted. I took on the tight, invisible duties that oldest daughters take on when everyone believes they can handle it. College applications without help, FAFSA forms, a rotating cast of after-school jobs that taught me how to smile while my feet hurt. I learned to plan not only for what I needed, but for what everyone around me had forgotten to need. I went to the University of Washington because I could walk there from the bus stop and live at home without paying rent. I studied finance because numbers were quiet and honest, even when people weren't. In my junior year, I set up a high-yield savings account and called it Someday. I watched the balance tick up $50 at a time, a line of small choices that meant something larger. Someday I would have a down payment, or a safety net, or a way out. The year I graduated, Ryan dropped out of community college. He said he was going to build a brand. He had a podcast, a photography page. Then he got a job at a trendy cafe that let him wear beanies behind the bar. He posted latte art to his stories. He stayed out late and went to warehouse shows and took pictures of himself on rooftops at dawn. He was charming enough that his tips paid for most of it. The rest, well, it seemed to come from somewhere. I suspected it was Mom and Dad, but I didn't ask. The less I knew, the less I had to argue about. My first job out of college was at a mid-sized investment firm in a boxy building downtown with always cold air conditioning. I started as a junior analyst on a portfolio that wasn't glamorous, municipal bonds, insurance floats, but I loved it. I loved reconciling a model until it held still. I loved end-of-quarter days when the office hummed and I could feel the numbers lining up like disciplined soldiers. I loved buying my own coffee and not checking my balance every time I tapped my card. That first year, I stayed late and volunteered for anything. Eventually, my manager gave me my first small account. I opened a spreadsheet that morning and felt, privately, like I'd been handed a kite in a steady wind. Around that time, Mom called and asked if I could help cover their winter heating bill. Dad's hours had been cut back while his building renovated. I said yes without thinking. When the envelope came, I dropped a check in and drove it over. Mom hugged me at the door and cried. Dad came in from the garage and said he didn't know what they'd do without me. I felt like I'd been allowed to do the thing I was best at, make a crisis manageable. But money has gravity. Once it's flowing in a direction, it gathers momentum. The next month there was a dental bill that insurance didn't cover. Then a car repair. It was always until things level out. They usually did. Then Ryan lost his job at the cafe because the owner's nephew needed hours. He got hired at a startup that sold sustainable dog collars. He got fired for missing a shipping window. He drove Uber for a while. He sprained his wrist in a longboard fall and couldn't drive. He got a part-time marketing gig. He bought a mirrorless camera on a store credit card because I needed to apply for this creative agency internship. If this were a cleaner story, there would be a single moment when everything changed. A snap in the air like a power line falling. But the truth is, the line frayed over years. Most of those years I was busy with promoted titles and closed books and the thrilling adult relief of choosing my own lamps. Busy meeting someone and then, after a season and a half of trying, deciding it wasn't the right fit. Busy training for a half marathon down on the trail by the ship canal and getting shin splints and telling myself I'd try again next spring. Busy failing to notice that my role in my family had quietly become CFO, ATM, and emotional sponge. The linked accounts were practical artifacts of an old problem. After college, when I still lived at home, we'd set up a shared checking account so I could drop in money for utilities. This was the logistical compromise between my insistence on transparency and my mom's insistence that she shouldn't have to ask every time. When I moved out, I took my name off their main account, but we never closed the little one. It sat there like a forgotten key under a rock. I didn't realize, not really, that I had left the door open until I logged into my savings on a rainy Sunday in March and watched my stomach go cold. The figure stood out from the page like a bruise. $18,000 moved out of someday. The description was bland and bureaucratic. Internal transfer, linked account. The date was Friday. The hour was 4:07 p.m., which is exactly the time the office gets loud with people returning from coffee breaks and asking who's ordering Thai. I must have been in a meeting, talking about cash sweeps, while part of my own cash swept into a drain I hadn't authorized. I stared at the number until it seemed less real, then toggled over to the old shared account we never used. It had a faint heartbeat, like a pilot light, low balance notices, a subscription charge for my mom's recipe app. And there it was, $18,000 in, $18,000 out, the out to a cashier's check. Under memo, a line that made my eyes sting. Card settlement, Northwestern Financial. I knew that name in the abstract, one of those big umbrella companies that service 1,000 tiny plastic sins. I texted Ryan, "Call me." He didn't. I called my mom, and she answered on the second ring, voice cheerful in a way that made me feel 12. "Hi, sweetie. How's work? Did you or Dad move money from my account?" The pause wasn't long. It was breath length, but it contained a small, lethal resignation, like we were finally saying out loud something we'd done by instinct for years. "Don't panic," she said. "We had to help Ryan. He's been drowning. The collectors were going to take him to court, Erica. It's not like the money's gone forever." I stood in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear, feeling my pulse in my jaw. The kettle on the stove began to hiss, and I turned off the gas with more force than necessary. I didn't trust my voice at first, because it wanted to be 12 again or it wanted to be fire. When it came out, it was flat. "You used my savings to pay his credit card debt." "Your savings are for the family," she said, like she was reminding me of a simple rule about shoes on the carpet. "We're family. Family helps." There it was, our catechism. Family helps. The problem was that the sentence had always had a hidden clause. Family helps Ryan, and Erica makes it possible. "You didn't ask me." "We were going to," she said, and I could hear her moving a stack of magazines, opening a drawer. "They said if we didn't get a cashier's check by 5, they would escalate. Your father was at work. I couldn't get you, and your link was right there. And I thought, well, you're doing so well, honey. You have that good job." Something in me took that sentence and set it on a high shelf where I could look at it later without breaking it against the floor. I said, "I have to go," and hung up. I turned my phone face down. I leaned my forehead against the refrigerator and let the cold help. This is the part of the story where I would like to tell you I had a plan. That I had a plan the way I have them at work. A clean, ordered response with contingencies and QA. What I had was coffee, I didn't drink, a raincoat, and the ability to put one foot in front of the other. I put on the raincoat and walked. Seattle is good for walking when your mind is trying to jump the tracks. The sidewalks were slick with that constant, almost friendly rain. I passed the flower shop on Roy where they put buckets of tulips under an awning even in bad weather. I passed the little bakery with the almond croissants I only let myself buy on Fridays. I watched a couple argue quietly at a crosswalk, and then reach for each other's sleeves at the same moment. I walked until the thought that kept trying to sprint, the number, slowed to a jog, then a steady march. By the time I got home, I had made a list. Not on paper, but in the place behind my eyes where lists live. Call the bank, remove the link, talk to someone who isn't family, decide with intention what happens next. The bank, like all banks, was polite and deliberate. The woman who answered wore the unflappable tone of someone trained to handle hysteria without absorbing it. "I can see the transfer," she said. "Because the link was established by you and not reported compromised, we cannot reverse. We can sever the link moving forward. I'm very sorry. How long was the link active? 6 years. And you can't tell me how many transfers there have been across the lifetime, can you?" "I can mail you a statement," she said. "I can also help you set up alerts. We can require 2-factor on any new links. I always recommend that." After we hung up, my phone buzzed. "Ryan, finally." "Hey," he said, voice bright, as if we'd just bumped into each other outside a coffee shop. "Mom said you called." "You paid off your credit card with my money." He sucked in his breath like I'd announced a surprise guest at his birthday party. It wasn't like that. They were harassing me, like calling from different numbers, leaving notes, threatening to sue. It was getting dark. I'm applying to new gigs, but if there's a judgment, I'm screwed. "So you used my savings." Mom said it was cool. She said you'd understand. "You're crushing it. You've got that. What is it, assistant portfolio manager now?" She said you've been saving for years. "And that means what, Ryan? That my savings are community property?" He sighed so loudly my ear buzzed. "I'll pay you back," he said. "I mean, it won't be fast, but I will, I swear." This was like a family emergency. An emergency is a car crash. A hospital bill. This is your bad math. Silence, then a scoff. That's harsh. I didn't trust what would come out of my mouth if I kept going. I said, "I'm done talking for now," and hung up. When your family knocks a wall down in your head, you find rooms you didn't realize you had. That week I opened drawers. I looked hard at numbers I had half ignored, because they were easier not to see. I requested the bank's paper statement, a thick manila envelope that arrived like a deliverable from the version of me who used to run everyone else's errands. I sat at my kitchen table and flipped through the pages, making marks with a pencil the way I used to do in undergrad when I couldn't afford printer ink and printed everything in draft mode. There were other transfers. Not many. None as obscene as the one for $18,000. But there were 400s and 250s. One $1,000 that looked like a temporary loan I did not remember approving. They were spread over 3 years, mostly in seasons when Ryan's job situation had gone sideways. Seeing them collected in one place made something inside me tilt. I had told myself a story in which I was choosing to help. It turned out I had also been, by my inattention, choosing not to see. I met my friend Cass, after work at a quiet bar in Belltown that tries to feel like New York. We sat at a small marble table by the window and watched people with expensive coats walk 2 dogs each. Cass is a data scientist with good taste in boots and a sense of humor that only gets sharper when things get unfair. I told her everything. She let me speak until I ran out of sentences. "They stole from you," she said finally. "They're my parents." "They stole from you," she repeated, gently this time, like I needed the words measured and placed into my hands. "It's not complicated because they gave birth to you. It's complicated because you love them. Those are different." I closed my eyes. The low music in the bar, the clink of glass, the smell of something citrus. Everything felt too detailed. When I opened them, she was looking at me with that expression that means she's about to tell me the thing I've been pretending not to know. "What happens now?" she asked. "I don't know. You do." I cut the link, I said. I stopped being their plan. I swallowed. I talked to them. Not on the phone. Good, she said. Also, put your bank account on full Fort Knox mode. Alerts, 2-factor, new passwords. Assume that if a door exists, they will try it. I laughed once, humorless. Cass, yeah? What if I'm wrong? What if this ruins us and I can't forgive myself? She took her time. You have been keeping your family from the consequences of their choices for a very long time. You are not ruining anything by stepping aside. You're letting gravity work. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in the blue light of my phone and changed passwords, set alerts, disabled features I didn't understand 5 hours earlier. I wrote a list for the next day. I included things like call utility and take my name off autopay, even though I hadn't paid a bill for them in months. The point was to check. I included buy the croissant on Friday, because small kindness has to coexist with triage, or you become brittle and unbearable. On Thursday, I drove to Ballard. The house looked the way it always does in March. Wet, green around the edges, the big hydrangea in the front yard still leafless but plodding. When I opened the front door, the smell of lemon cleaner and coffee hit me. Mom's voice floated from the kitchen. She came out wiping her hands on a dish towel, bright smile in place. There she is, she said. I was going to text, do you want a grilled cheese? Your dad's on his way home. I took off my shoes and lined them up on the rug in the entryway, because even now I follow the rules of this house. I followed her into the kitchen. The counters were clean. The stack of magazines had been moved from the table to a basket. A vase of grocery store tulips leaned slightly from the center. My mother takes care to set scenes, even when the plot is unwelcome. Before Dad gets here, I said, we need to talk. Her smile faltered, but she gestured for me to sit. She sat across from me and folded the dish towel into neat squares until her hands had something to do. I looked at the bank records. I said, there have been multiple transfers. And the $18,000, Mom, you can't do that. You can't use my savings to fix Ryan's mistakes. We didn't use it for mistakes, she said sharply, and then softened like she'd hurt herself. We used it for a crisis. You weren't picking up. They said court. He's been so anxious, Erica. You know how he gets. You know how he spirals. I do know, I said. And I know you cushion him. I know you tell yourself it's temporary every time. I know I have been complicit in letting you tell that story. But it's not temporary. It's a pattern, and I'm no longer in it. She blinked. I watched it land. We raised you to be kind, she said after a moment. We raised you to share. You've always been so good at that. I am kind, I said, and I will continue to be. I will not, however, be stolen from and then be told to be grateful you believed I could afford it. Her mouth set. The front door opened and my dad came in, stamping rain from his boots. He looked tired, as he always does after work, his hair flattened from a hat. He saw us at the table and registered the tension like you register lightning far away. What's going on? He asked, not unkindly, but with the wariness of a man who has learned to avoid the middle of family weather. I told him. I didn't raise my voice. I ran through the facts like they were the bullet points of a memo, because if I let feeling in too early, it would overflow, and we'd all drown. When I got to the end, he rubbed his forehead. We were going to pay it back, he said. Once your mother's bonus comes through. Ryan's got interviews. This is just bridge money. Bridges go somewhere, I said. Where does this go? To getting him stable, Mom said. To getting him set up so he can finally get ahead. Dad looked between us, then at the table. Maybe we should have asked, he allowed. I laughed, short and surprised, because it had never occurred to me that he would say it out loud. You should have asked, I said. You should have given me the dignity of refusing. You should have respected that this money is mine. You didn't. You used it because it was there. Dad shifted, like he wanted to stand, but the weight of the moment kept him in the chair. What do you want to do now? I want you to understand that this can't happen again, I said. I've already severed the link. I've changed the passwords. I have alerts on everything. If you call me because someone's in the hospital, I will come. If you call me because a collector is calling, I will tell you who to contact for a payment plan, and I will not be the payment plan. Mom shook her head, a tiny movement, like she was resetting a screen. You're making this so big, she whispered. You're acting like we betrayed you. You did, I said. The room felt very quiet. I could hear the clock above the microwave tick. You did betray me. The back door opened, and Ryan came in on a draft of cold air, a beanie pulled down to his eyebrows, shoulders hunched like he was auditioning for pity. He clocked the scene, smirked, and tried to turn it. "Family meeting?" he said, dropping his backpack on the floor. What did I do now? I looked at him for a long beat. He shifted, then huffed a laugh. "You paid off your cards with my savings," I said. He rolled his eyes. "Mom already explained. It was time sensitive. You could have called me," I said. "You could have asked, and I would have said no. And you would have had to talk to a counselor at Northwestern Financial about a repayment plan like an adult." He opened his mouth, but I held up my hand. "I'm not here to negotiate," I said. "I'm here to say how this goes now," Dad sighed. "Erica, no," I said. "I'm speaking. I am not your fund. I am not your contingency. The link is gone. If you ever touch my accounts again, I will file a report. I will call a lawyer. I will do the thing that makes you say, 'How could you?' And I will do it anyway because it will be the correct thing." Ryan slouched further. "You think you're so perfect." "I think I am imperfect and tired," I said. "I think I have been complicit in a system where you don't learn to carry your own weight, and Mom and Dad don't learn to let you. I think this is the first time I'm putting down what was never mine to hold." No one spoke for several seconds. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car door slammed and someone laughed as they ran down the sidewalk. Mom blinked quickly. Dad looked at his hands. Ryan blew out a breath. "If this is about the 18 grand, he said careless, "I told you I'll pay you back." "When?" I asked. He shrugged. "I don't know, soon. When things take off." "What is soon?" He shifted. "You're being intense." I looked at my parents. "Do you hear this?" I asked. "Do you hear the part where there is no plan? Just the assumption that someone will float him until there is a plan?" Mom stood abruptly, the dish towel tumbling to the floor. "I'm not doing this," she said, voice high. "I'm not sitting here being told I'm a bad mother because I kept my son from being sued." "I didn't call you a bad mother," I said, even as something in me ached at the word. "I called you someone who used her daughter. If he is being sued, you help him find a lawyer. If he is in debt, you sit with him and call the number. You do not steal from me and then act like I'm cruel when I notice." She pressed her fists into the counter and then released. "You should go." "Okay," I said. I stood. "I will. I'll check in a week. I expect to hear a plan for how you and Dad are going to pay back the money. It's not optional." Dad finally met my eyes. There was something like shame there. "We'll look," he said, and I believed he meant it in the way men like him mean things, with effort, until the old gravity pulls them back. On the drive home, the rain had gotten meaner. Wipers thumped. Brake lights bled red across the wet streets. I felt shaky and clear, the way you feel after you've narrowly missed something sharp. That night, I sent myself an email with the subject line, "Immediate actions," and bullet points beneath. Freeze credit, new PINs, move savings to a different bank, auto-forward certain numbers to voicemail. I even wrote one that said, "Buy the expensive olive oil," because I am trying to understand that austerity isn't how you punish a wound you didn't make. In the next days, I did small, unglamorous things that added up to something larger. I called the credit bureaus and set a freeze. I moved my someday savings to a new institution and opened a separate emergency fund there with a note in the account nickname, "This is yours." I set a calendar reminder to check my statements every Saturday morning before coffee, not after. I emailed Northwestern Financial, explained that I was not the debtor, and asked for a copy of any paperwork they believed pertained to me. They replied, politely and fast, that they had no account in my name. I printed the email and stuck it in a folder labeled "If we end up in court." The folder was thinner than I expected. That felt like a win. When the bank's paper envelope came with the whole list of transactions since the dawn of the link, I sat down and went line by line, penciling notes in the margin like a teacher grading a long, shaky essay. I totaled the amounts and circled the figure. It wasn't life-ending. It would not cost me a home I hadn't bought yet. It would not send me back to the night shift. But it was mine. And I felt, holding those pages, the exact shape of that fact. The following Sunday, I woke early and ran down the hill to the trail. The air was wet but not punishing. I timed my breath with the slap of my shoes and felt, with every step, my body remember that it knows what to do. When I got back, there was a text from Mom that said, "Dinner tonight? Roast chicken." I stared at it and let the words settle. I typed, "I can come for an hour." "We will talk about repayment," she replied. "We'll talk." That was something. At their table that night, the tulips had been replaced with daffodils, the cheap, bright kind from the grocery store that flare like a cartoon sun. My dad carved the chicken. Ryan didn't show. No one brought it up. We ate like people auditioning for the part of family at dinner. After plates were pushed back, I took out the folder and slid a single sheet across to my parents. It was not a legal document, only something that felt like one. A repayment outline. 12 months. No interest. Automatic transfer to me on the first of the month. The total was the full amount the ledger had shown me. I did not include the small, "only because we forgot" transfers. I am not a monster, even when I wish I could be. Mom read it and didn't talk for a full minute. Dad read it, then read it again. He looked at her. She looked at him. In that look, I saw the timeline of every bill they had paid late, every favor they asked, every unspoken truce. "We can't do this," she said finally. "Not like this. We don't have that much free each month." "I can lower the monthly number and extend the time," I said. "But the transfers are automatic." They looked at each other again, another long look that sounded like a silent argument. Dad cleared his throat. "We can do 9 months at this amount," he said, tapping the page at a figure I had offered as a middle. "And then we can reassess." Relief and anger collided in my chest. "Okay," I said. "We'll sign it," Mom bristled. "We don't need to sign." "We do," I said softly. "Because if you forget, I want to remind you with something other than begging." She didn't pick up a pen. She stared at me like she was trying to find the version of me who would laugh and say, "Never mind." When she didn't find her, she picked up the pen and signed with a trembling flourish. Dad signed too. I signed last, because this affects me last only if I let it. When I got home, I put the signed paper in the folder. I put the folder in a drawer with my passport and the title to my car. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window, watching the reflection of my own face over the streetlights. I felt unsteady and proud and 10 years older. People think betrayal is a single slice, but it happens in layers. The layer I didn't see coming arrived 2 days later, when I opened my phone to a group text. Cousins, aunts, my mother's side, a sprawling thread where babies and recipes and political forewords mix. There, where everyone could read, Ryan had written, "Pray for our family. Some people care more about money than blood." There was a photo attached of him at a cafe, head down, a latte art heart in a cup. The caption read, "Trying to stay grateful while my own sister watches us drown." I sat perfectly still. Then the replies started. A few predictable ones. "Family is everything," from Aunt Sarah. "Money comes and goes," from a cousin I haven't seen since high school. But then a surprise. Aunt Meredith, my mother's older sister, who lives on the peninsula and only comes to Thanksgiving every other year because her back hurts. "Ryan," she wrote, "I love you, but that's not fair. Don't make a villain out of the person who has been bailing water out of your boat for a decade." The thread went quiet. Then my mother, "Let's not do this here." Then finally my own fingers, which had been shaking over the keyboard, typed, "I'm happy to talk to anyone one-on-one. I won't litigate this in a group chat." I put my phone down and felt the old urge to call and make it smooth. I did not call. I went to work. I sat in a meeting with a CFO who wanted to compress his reporting timeline by half and make it not hurt. I told him it would hurt. Then I told him how to stage the pain. When the meeting ended, my manager said, "That was well handled." And I had the bizarre and satisfying thought that perhaps the skills are transferable. Money, timelines, people who insist on a future they haven't earned. That night, a voicemail from my dad. "We appreciate the plan. Your mother is upset. She feels accused. I'm trying to keep the peace. We love you. I listened 3 times, not because I didn't understand, but because I wanted to swallow the tone." He wanted an outcome where no one had to feel the sharp edges of their own choices. I've wanted that too. Wanting it does not make it possible. The first of the month landed with a soft ping on my phone. Transfer received. It was a small number, but it was real. I stared at the notification for a long moment, and then let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. This is not the end of the story. It is where the ground stabilized enough that I could take the next step without looking at my feet. There would be a conversation with Ryan that didn't go well. There would be a community college counselor who called me by accident because my number was still listed as his emergency contact. There would be, unexpectedly, a text from Aunt Meredith inviting me to spend a weekend at her place where there is a cedar hot tub and a view of the water. And there would be a conversation on her deck where I said, for the first time out loud, "I don't know if I like my mother when money is involved." And she said, "You're allowed." But that came later. That came after the night I stood in my kitchen, held the envelope with the signed plan, and realized I had done something that could not be undone for the sake of comfort. I had chosen myself without apology. I had said, I am a person and not a policy. And for the first time in a very long time, I slept.